Okay. I hear early radio was broadcast by amateurs and that ordinary people would build their own radio sets.
Radio sets, yeah. Okay. Yeah, my brother built one when I was a kid. It was about 28 or 29, something like that. Built a little crystal set out of an oatmeal box. I remember it had some big brass brads on it, and that kind of revolved around the top, did. And he'd take a little wire pick, specially designed to scratch his crystal, you know. And he had a pair of headphones on. Every now and then he'd hit a station. There were 2 or 3 stations in this area that we could hit. And one time I hit Mr. Gish, which was just a short ways from the boarding house I was living in, about a half a block away, and hit that. And Lloyd called my mother and says, "I've got Mr. Gish on the headsets here." And so first thing that happened, my mother called Aunt Ellen. She was the boarding house proprietor, and she put the headphones on. And her eyes got big as a couple of saucers. She's, "My heaven sakes alive, that's Mr. Gish, isn't it?" And oh boy, she looked at Lloyd and thought, "My golly, he's a rocket scientist, nearly."
And Mr. Gish was how far away?
About a half a block away, yeah.
Tell me about Mr. Gish's radio station.
Well, it was on 8th Avenue between Taylor and Polk at that time, and he had a gas pump out in front. It was an electrical pump. It was very rare. You know, most of them you had to hand pump those things to get the fuel up into the bowl, but this had he'd mash a little button, little motor would come on, it'd pull that fuel up, or gasoline up in the little bowl. And he'd run it on special every now and then, and cars would be lined up a half a block away to save, instead of 9 cents, save 10 cents. It was 10 cents a gallon. He might put it on for 9 cents a gallon, and boy, it caused a traffic jam all up and down 9th Street there. And it's quite a rarity to see that many cars trying to buy gas at one time.
Mr. Gish owned a gas station, and then the radio station was up on top of the
floor? No, it wasn't. It was on the same, it was back in the station there. He just sold gas and oil in front, and then had a room there where he had his radio station. And us kids, we kids would look around there, and he'd have a band in there, you know, maybe 3 or 4 instruments, and from some part of town, they'd be over there putting on a show for the radio, you know, and playing songs, and maybe there'd be a violin and 2 or 3 trumpets and saxophone, and they'd play pretty good music, you know, kind of entertain the people, you know.
Did you ever go in there?
Yeah, I'd slip in there. He didn't. That'd be real quiet. He emphasized quietness, but every now and then we'd slip through the door, you know, and go in there, and we'd get a big kick out of watching all that stuff go on, you know.
Now, what would happen tell the story about how he would be playing the radio and somebody would come and get gas.
Well, he'd be, the radio station would be on the air, and some guy'd pull up out in front, and he'd say, "Well, folks, I've got to go ahead and finish this tune here, and I'll be back and put another on," talk about records or something. "I got to go wait on a customer out here."
And then when he came back, would he tell you what he talked about his customer?
No, he might. I don't know. I don't recall that, but anyhow, that's the way he operated.
Okay. What do you remember the earliest radio national broadcast being like?
National, you mean? Oh, yeah, one night before we moved to Amarillo, I was over in Oklahoma. Well, one of our neighbors, he had a grocery store. He was pretty well financed there, so he had a great big console radio, they call it, big chest, and we're listening to a fight that night. Somehow we got it coast to coast. Jack Sharkey and Jack Dempsey were fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world. And I bet there was 25, 30 neighbors in his front room there listening to that fight. And that's the first one I ever heard. Everybody's excited about hearing from Chicago or New York, where it came from.
What year was that?
Oh, I would say 1926 or 7, roughly.
Do you remember hearing what we now think of famous radio broadcasts on the radio?
Yeah, I used to hear the Lucky Strike Hit Parade. That was back in the early 30s. And I'd hear from the Palomar out in Los Angeles, that big dance hall where 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people danced at one time. The big bands would come through there like Glenn Gray and the Casaloma, and they would broadcast coast to coast on Columbia Broadcasting System for maybe Chesterfield Cigarettes, somebody like that, you know.
Was that the first time you had ever heard from that far away?
Well, I was Lloyd and my brother and I were there out there one night, so we visited the Palomar. And just before they went to go on the air that night, Glenn Gray and the Casaloma band was there, and he says, "Now we're going to hold up a sign that says applause, and whenever we go to announcing the coming of the band, when he played Smoke Rings, his theme song, everybody applause," which they did. And I memorized every word that announcer said. I was maybe 17 years old, wasn't quite out of high school.
Do you remember what it was like to be in Amarillo or Muskogee, Oklahoma, or wherever you were and be able to hear other parts of the country?
Well, yeah, it didn't impress me too much. I guess somebody did, but I remember one night when Gene Tunney and Jack Dempsey fought for the heavyweight championship of the world. I remember the next day at school, well, all the kids were talking about it. The long counts, you know, Dempsey had him down and count 14 or 15 somewhere, and everybody's griping about it. Dempsey should have won, but Tunney won.
Yeah, first time everybody'd been able to hear that as it happened, I guess.
As it happened, as live, they call it.
Huh. Well, okay, what about things like that were real famous, like when Pearl Harbor got bombed and those kind of things?
Well, I'd been out hunting ducks, Mother and I had, and we were just fresh married. And we were out east of Plainview. I lived in Plainview working for Cut A Packing Company. And we came back in and listened on the radio, and it says the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese happened at a certain time today. Is a Sunday, December the 7th. And I thought, well, that's another one of those Orson Welles tales that got on there. And we just kind of passed it off. Pretty soon it came on again, you know, and I thought, uh-oh, this is something happening.
Do you remember FDR declaring war?
Oh, yes, I do.
On radio?
On radio, yes, sir.
That's something everybody remembers where they were.
Yeah. I remember exactly hunting those ducks out there east of town in Plainview when World War II started. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Did you depend on the radio then for your news?
Yeah, we depended on radio for news. Everybody had a radio in their house, you know, and they'd listen to the 8 o'clock news or whatever it was, 9 o'clock news. And we depended on radio a lot, like they do on TV now. Of course, a lot of people depend on radio in their car now, you know.
What's the story about you going down when you were on your 9th birthday or 10th birthday or whatever that was and listening to the World Series?
Well, the Globe News, it was 6th and Fillmore then, and right above it, they had a great big billboard, a huge thing, and it had a picture, it had a diamond, baseball diamonds built there in a form of a diamond, you know, and first base, home base, first base, second base, third base, and they had guys working behind this thing, and when Hank Greenberg would hit a double to second, you know, they'd move the white slots up to second base, and the guy would come and say, Hank Greenberg hit a drive to right field, and he went to second base, and so on. That's the way they described it. It's kind of like television in a way. It was all done by...
But was that on radio?
It was on radio, uh-huh.
And so the radio announcer was announcing it, and the people downtown
were
reenacting it?
All out in the street, and where they sat on the other side of 6th Street on the north side, and I guess there were 200 or 300 people over sitting on the grass, you know, listen to all that, and you could hear it pretty plain. You see those guys moving those things around to the bases and announce who's up batting, and it was just, boy, just clear as a bell to us then.
Was that a big community event?
Well, mostly men and boys out of school. It happened happened in the afternoons, the World Series, you know. And as soon as kids get out of school, they'd all go down there, and folks that weren't working would come down and watch it, watch the World Series on radio.
You bought a television set before there was even a television station in Amarillo.
Yeah. Yeah, neighbor and I he had one, I had one. We saved our money up, I think cost $300 or $400 at that time, which was a ton of money. Anyhow, we'd turn the thing on, we'd get snow, and every now and then, he'd call me and say, well, I got a voice down on that Lubbock station. Lubbock had a TV station then. And so, boy, I'd flip it over and I could hear a little voice coming on TV about Lubbock, and something about that. And we'd just watch everything. So anyhow, in a few more months, 3 or 4 more months, Amarillo got a TV station. And I remember the first night we had TV, this stairwell here, it had 10, 12 people sitting there and people all here and all back in the dining area there. I guess we had 25, 30 people here watching that. I don't know what it's showing, some kind of a show. I think Blackie, old boy named Blackie is a hero running over the rooftops chasing some desperado had done something, a lot of fun.
And was it just snow until the show would come on?
Yeah, it'd just snow until the show would come on at 7 o'clock, or when it's going to come on, or 6 o'clock.
And watching television wasn't easy back then, was it? You'd have to keep getting up and adjusting stuff.
Well, yeah, you had to do a little adjusting long, yeah.
And usually you couldn't see very well, or not?
Yeah, I could see it pretty good, just black and white, It's fairly sharp.
Do you remember how exciting it was to get color?
Well, yeah, we went out I guess the local station out here, north town here, and watched the first color broadcast when it was on New Year's Day, I believe. Watched it, the Rose Bowl. It wasn't the Rose Bowl, it was a Tournament Rose Parade. I think we saw that in color, and it was really exceptionally beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's enough about television and radio, I guess. Let's talk about some early childhood memories, okay? This is for Robin. I'll just go down this list here. Talk about Tullahassee, your father and...
I was born in a little town out of Muskogee named Tullahassee, Oklahoma. And it was an old mission to start out with, Tullahassee Mission. I believe the Quakers had it built somewhere other than the 2 big brick buildings, and they educated the Indians there. Muskogee was a home of 5 tribes, 5 civilized tribes. And they had these missions out in the country from there, and they educated certain tribes of Indians. But anyhow, the money ran out from the government, and so they just kind of called it quits after 2 or 3 or 4 years. So the blacks moved in and took over those buildings. One of them had a small grocery store in there. The other building was an old doctor, MD. He had his offices in there, medical offices. And he brought me into the world, this old Negro doctor. My daddy was the game warden and the county commissioner of Wagner County at that time. And he farmed 40 acres of cotton and corn in close to that town. And they had a well in the center of town where we called them darkies back in those days. It's what everybody called them. And niggers, but that's what they were called. And they'd bring their wagons by, and they would draw water out of the well. Everybody had a bucket in their wagon so the livestock could have a drink, in summertime, warm. And they'd always water their horses and mules there.
What do you remember about your dad?
Very little about my daddy. I was 2.5 years old, I think, when he passed away with a flu epidemic in 1919. I remember... had some noodle linoleum. He was putting it down in our kitchen, and he's putting a brass metal strip through there, nailing it together. And I remember that, and he had a white hat on. And that's about my only recollection of my father.
What about the reunions in Porter?
Well, we still have reunions in Porter, Oklahoma, the Robertson reunion. From 80 to 110 people generally attend. It's every other year. We're going to have one next year now. Year 2000, and we all get together. They come from all over the United States there.
What about Graham? There's something about a mattress factory?
My mother in Oklahoma, before we came out here to help my aunt in the boarding house in Amarillo, she was working in a mattress factory in Oklahoma, sewing what she called ticks, and she'd sew these ticks and they'd stuff the mattresses there, and they sold mattresses all over this part of all over Southwest, I guess. That's the way she made a living. It didn't make much money, but it made enough for us to eat and live on, go to school there in Muskogee.
You had there were 2 kids in your family?
Yeah, Lloyd and me.
And how old was Lloyd, and what was he like?
Lloyd was he's born 1907, I was born 1916. He's a little older than me, yeah.
Okay.
And he had a operation one time and took him to the hospital, and he lost a kidney. And he was a weakling for years and years after that, and had an awful hard time making a living.
How about when your mom moved to Amarillo? When did that happen?
She came out here in 1927 or 28, I'm not for sure, to help in the boarding house, and the oil boom was just about over with then. And she worked there for my aunt, and in 1929 my aunt died, and depression was just getting ready to set in, and my mother took over the boarding house, and it wasn't much of a living, but we generally had something to eat, and that's about it.
And how old were you then?
Oh, I was about 12, I guess. And this, I'd like to go back to this Gish radio tire deal. Had 2 great big huge white tires, one up in the air about 300 feet. And it was made out of wood, and they had his high lines up there, and that way get broadcast, get a little more further out, broadcast, people could hear them. Anyhow, we'd wait till dark, and no one could see us, and about 8 or 10 of us neighborhood boys would climb up those tires and just look all over town. They couldn't run us out because they couldn't see us up there. We had a ball up there.
They get mad at you for climbing it?
Well, someone told them that I guess we were climbing it, and I think he ran us out of there 1 or 2 nights and finally gave up on us.
Is there anything else you remember about Muskogee? Well, wait, we're not there yet. Sorry, I'm confused. How about the Civil War veterans? I guess we're still in Tullahassee.
When I was a kid living there in Muskogee, well, they didn't have hospitals for old Civil War veterans like they do for veterans now. And I think they would give them a little bit of money, and they'd stay with their children or in-laws or somebody, and they'd sit out in the front yard in the summertime. It was warm there. And we'd take a rubber band, cut it up in 2 or 3 little things, tie thread around it, looked like a little spider, and then we'd put it on a piece of string. They takes a stick, and we'd stick it over the old man would be sitting there, and we'd stick it over his ear and toss it in front of him, and he'd slap at it like that, think spider, and we'd pull it back up. He'd get to nodding again, we'd scare him again with it, and he'd slap at that thing. We ought to have been ashamed, but we had more fun just snickering back there, watch that old man slap those spiders.
Did you have a driveway of bottle caps?
Well, now that was out in Tullahassee. One of my uncles owned an old grocery store out there in Tullahassee, and they drank a lot of soda pop back in those days. Every soda pop bottle had a cap, and weren't like these cans you drank out of. And when they'd get that thing full of bottle tops, a can, well, just throw them out in the driveway, and pretty soon cars run over them. They had the finest driveway you ever saw out of bottle caps. It wouldn't get stuck out there on that bottle cap like a bunch of gravel,
Now I'm confused about the timeline. You were born in Tullahassee?
Born in Tullahassee in 1916.
Moved to Muskogee?
Moved to Muskogee in 1919.
After your dad died?
Yeah, and then I moved out here in 1927.
Okay. So all these things that we're talking about right now happened in Tullahassee. The driveway bottle cap, the Civil War veterans?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
No, Civil War veterans happened in Muskogee.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. And Graham worked at a mattress factory where?
In Muskogee.
In Muskogee.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. How about goose liver sandwiches?
Well, my aunt,
Okay,
my
wait
uncle.
a second, Dad. Let me change takes.
All right, Ron.
Okay.
About the goose liver sandwiches. Well, in the summertime, my mother was still working the mattress factory, and I was out of school, so nearly every day I'd go out in the country with my uncle and my aunt and my cousin Clifford. They had this little store out in Tullahassee, and most of their people were blacks that trade with them. And so my aunt had her little building separate from the grocery store, and she sold sandwiches and hamburgers out there. And so these Negro men, they'd had 2 or 3 little kids follow them around, and they'd come up there and order a goose liver sandwich. I stayed in a sandwich shop somewhere, and my aunt would make them a goose liver sandwich, a big one, you know, and probably charge them 10, 15 cents for it. And the man would stand out there in front and eat that, and the little kids look up at him like that, just wanted it so bad. But anyhow, he never would offer them, give them any of the sandwich to eat. That impressed me as kind of bad.
I wonder what those kids ate. How about Negro Sam on the mountain?
Well, that's a story classic. Had an old Negro man named, everybody called him Nigger Sam, and he dressed in rags, and he wore shoes were made out of tow sacks, burlap bags, and baling wire wrapped around them. And he had 2 sticks he carried all the time like that to get along, propel him along. One of them named Grab Hook, one named Walnut. And he'd go through the country and come up to, for instance, our house there in Tullahassee, and he'd say, Ms. Robertson said, do you have some cooked bread for me? Said, I'm hungry, and said, I need something to eat, and says, I'm going to chop some wood for you or rake your leaves or whatever you got. Says, I always like to work for whatever I can get. And so everyone would give him a little cooked bread. He'd put it in a sack and go on down the road, you know, house to house like that. And he did that all day long. So one day he came up to my mother and said, Miss Robinson said, there's a $10 bill down the road there in the bend in the road, old dirt roads. And my mother kind of laughed, says, well, why didn't you pick it up? Sam says, well, you know, I don't know how to spend money. Said, never had any money in my life, I remember. Said, and my mother was talking to a neighbor later in the day, and so he goes down there and he finds it. It says, $10 bill.
And $10 then was something.
It's quite a lot of money.
Wow.
But anyhow, that was, the old Negro lived out on a mountain they called Brushy Mountain. Lived in a cave out there, and he had some old quilts and stuff down in there. And he lived there, and he did work for his cooked bread. That's the way he made a living.
What is cooked bread?
Biscuits or whatever they happen to cook, you know.
Oh, okay.
And may have some scrambled eggs left over or something. They just scrapped it and scrapped it. It'd save them for them. Knew it'd be by, you know, that day or next day.
Did you have grandparents that you remember?
I remember my grandfather is all. And he lived in a little town called Porter over there close to Tullahassee. And they had a big old wash tub there, and someone had caught a catfish. That thing about that long. It just barely fit in that tub and had so much water in it. And that old fish swam around like that around that tub. My grandfather had a black hat, big old black hat he wore all the time. And he farmed in that area, and that's my only recollection of my grandfather, I guess.
Whose father was he?
He was father of my, that was my daddy's father.
What'd you call him?
We called him Dad Robertson.
Do you know when he died?
He died in about 31, I believe it was. 31.
And then there are some memories from Muskogee, something about a white linen suit and a balloon.
Yeah, well, Mother and I lived close to fairgrounds, and it was about September. Mother had me a nice white linen suit. She's a good seamstress, and made my clothes where they look real nice on me in this real white linen. So we went to fair, and all the roads weren't paved. They were old dusty roads, but they oiled them down in the summertime, keep the dust from blowing around. So we were coming back to the fair, walking back home, and she got me a balloon that had some gas in it, and somehow it got away from me. And boy, I went to squalling, bawling for her to get me that balloon, and it was too far to go back and get another. And she said, come on, I'll get you another balloon. I got mad, and so I got down in that bar ditch where all that oil was, and that linen suit, and just scrubbed myself all up and down there. And boy, I really got a blister, and I'll tell you.
How about selling papers downtown in Muskogee?
Well, I sold a Muskogee Times-Democrat. They sold for a nickel then. I'd sell about 10 or 15 every day, every afternoon from 4 o'clock to about 7. And I remember selling papers down there for a year or two, downtown Muskogee.
Would you call out like we think?
Oh, yeah, I'd call Muskogee Time Democrat, and I sold the papers here in Amarillo, too.
What would you say on the street corner?
I'd say, well, one time we had an extra out, Mayor Lee Bivens is dead. Mayor Lee Bivens is dead. That was Lee Bivens, you know, of Amarillo fame here. He's one of the first ranchers in this country.
How about kindergarten in Muskogee?
I went to a kindergarten. It was real close, about a block and a half away, and it was Catholic kindergarten. And first thing you know, I was coming home. Mother said, well, what'd you learn? I said, well, I learned how to recite the Virgin Mary so-and-so, something like that. And I could recite those Catholic, whatever you call those Catholic catechisms. And so she thought they was going to make Catholic out of me. So I went there one semester and she pulled me out and sent me somewhere that didn't want to make Catholic out of me. And I found a gold fountain pen there one time. It's 24 karat gold. That's pure gold. I still have a little old bitty gold fountain pen. And I couldn't find anybody that had lost it. I kind of put out a few feelings. So we still have that old 24 karat, that pure gold fountain pen.
Wow. What religion were you growing up?
Well, we just went to a mission. I think it was maybe the Methodist Church or something like that.
Okay.
Called a mission down on South Main Street.
When did you start going to First Christian Church here in Amarillo?
When I got here in 1928, went there. And
How come you went there?
well, my aunt was a member there. That ran the boarding house, you know.
Yeah, let's talk about the boarding house. What was that like?
Well, it was a lot of fun. Of course, a lot of work. Had 10, 12, 14 boarders.
Everybody have their own room?
Yeah.
Everybody have their own bathroom?
No, there's one bathroom, so help me. And everybody had a pitcher of water to drink and to wash their face, and first one thing too.
And so if I was a boarding house renter, what did I get? A room and the bathroom?
You got a room and a bathroom, you got a pitcher of water and a big wash bowl, and that's the way it was.
And would I get meals? Would I get meals?
Yeah, you get your meals.
And where would everybody eat?
A long table, it'd seat about 15, you know, and serve lots of good food.
Who would cook?
We had a cook hired for a while till depression hit so bad, and they had to let him go. And then my mother and would do most of the cooking. We'd kind of help her. My brother washed the dishes.
What would you do?
Oh, I'd dry the dishes, and I'd clean up and sweep the rooms, and first one thing too.
Y'all clean the rooms too? For
Yeah.
Everybody?
Yeah. After everybody go to work, we'd clean the rooms, you know, sweep floor and dust and stuff.
How much would they pay to live there?
$10 to $12 a week back in those days, you know.
Would people live there just weekly or monthly, or would they live there for a whole year, or what?
No, they'd live there. Some people live there several years, you know, 2, 3, 4 years.
Did you get to be friends with anybody?
Oh yeah, had a lot of good friends there.
You remember anybody?
Yeah, I remember old W.G. Smith. He was working down Santa Fe in the roundhouse there. He's a mechanic. When he retired, he moved to Raton, back to his old home, Raton, New Mexico. He's dead now. Everybody's died, and that's pretty years ago.
Talk about that Duke Ellington story.
Well, the Paramount Theater was a beautiful theater, and it was brand new. That's about 32. It was 1932. And Duke Ellington brought his band there. That's before Duke was famous then, but he hadn't gotten nationally famous, you know. And so he, as back when the blacks couldn't stay in a hotel, you know, or couldn't eat in a white restaurant, so they came in on 2 Pullman cars, the band did, and they slept down there at the Santa Fe tracks, Santa Fe Depot down east part of Amarillo there on 3rd Street. And so they had taxi for 10 cents back in those days, bring them down to Paramount Theater. And then there's a Magnolia Cafe there close to the Paramount Theater on 9th. Theo Pitchess was a Greek, and he had ran a good cafe there. And his brother would go down there and get your orders, you know, at the theater. And they'd bring their food up to him, you know. Theater, so it'd make it pretty nice for them there. Just so happened it worked out that way. So they had a place to sleep at night down in the Pullman cars. And stayed there 8 days, Duke Ellington did. We were out there playing football about the second day after school, you know, about 4 o'clock. Get out there on a big old sand lot and half a block's what it was. And neighborhood boys, and old Duke came out there, and his drummer, Sonny Greer, was all black. And old Duke said, "You mind if I catch a few balls for you boys or pass you some?" So fine. He fell right in, old Sonny Greer did. Man, he just really fell right in with us, and we thought that's fine. So next day, same thing happened. Maybe 2 or 3 more band members came out. And the week is all out there every day playing with us. Just had a flat ball. And he says, "You fellas seen the show?" Says, "I'll take you back stage door entrance back here, and we'll all go in free. Won't cost you anything." So we got to see this 2 or 3 change of pictures that week, and then watch his band play several times.
Cool. How old were you?
I guess I was about 13, 14.
About how many boys got to do that with you?
About 5.
Cool. How about Model Ts?
Well, my brother had a Model T. He gave $25 for him. He went to work for a loan company collecting debts. People borrow $10, $15, $20, and he'd have to go around and collect. So it was a good running old Model T. Man, I was so proud of that thing. I'd get in the back seat and go with him after school, Oh, it was a fine old car. Had a top on it, a canvas top.
Was it black?
It's black. It's all black.
Black then?
Yeah, Mr. Ford always said, "You have any color you want, as long as you like black."
How about hunting for arrowheads?
Oh, I've been in some arrowheads several years now, and I find quite a few arrowheads. In fact, I find them out here on Ross Rogers Golf Course even, pottery and arrows, really. Of course, I hunt a lot west of town or in the breaks out here. A lot of Indian artifacts all out through there, if you don't mind getting on your hands and knees and looking.
How about the story about when you were with Marvin Chamberlain and Harry Carl?
Well, that was right after World War II in 1945, fall of 45. Went to Four Corners area with Marvin's uncle. He lived back in there, and he's down there visiting his sister, Amarillo. And we went back in an old V8 Ford, 32 V8 Ford, I believe, took him home and stayed 3 or 4 or 5 days up there and hunting deer up there in southwestern Colorado. They began to farm pinto beans up there, and a lot of deer in that country. They come in and eat those beans, Anyhow, we had a horse apiece. Had horses there, and one day we took off and was out 15, 20 miles away in the canyon out in there, and this old boy said, "I got to water my horses. Let's go over here at the spring house. I'll show you an old Indian ruin." I said, "I don't think anyone knows anything about it." We got over there, and there's about 80 or 100 homes on this plateau. They were dug out in the ground, and cedar poles over the tops and dirt on top of that, and then had rotted and all fallen in, Hadn't been any Indians there in several hundred years. But anyhow, Harry Carl back, he's about 14 years old then, pretty agile, and so he shinnies down one of those little homes, and he brought out a pot, Indian pot. I said, "It's pretty all right." I said, "It's cracked. Go down and see if you can find one that's not cracked." He shuffled off down there and came out in a few minutes. Says, "Darn dark back there and feel a lot of pots. Is this an okay?" I said, "Boy, that doesn't got a crack in it." And so this old boy that lived there, old Prentice, was his apprentice back. He said, "Go pick up some of that gravel from that ant hill over there," and said, "Look at it real close." Went over and got me a handful of that, and I found beads in there. Bone bead, made out of bones, and they were all red and black and different colors, blue. And there's some dead Indians down there and these ants will bring anything out of the ground like that that's not foreign, that's foreign to the soil. These beads are foreign, so they bring them out, But anyhow, I thought, boy, that's something I wished I hadn't have done. I wish I had me a sandwich bag. I gathered up a couple dozen of them, but I didn't do it.
How old do you think they were?
Oh, several hundred years old. We don't know, 1,000. Can't ever tell.
And there were pots. Those pots were preserved all that time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's something. That's something. Mm-hmm. You have pretty good memories of growing up, don't you?
Pretty good.
Okay, anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, I can tell you stories about all hunting all out through northwest town here. You just go hunting out there. Amarillo, a little old town then. If you want to kill some blue quail, you just went out and killed you a bunch of blue quail or cottontail rabbits. They don't have them like that anymore. This was just a primitive country out here back in the early 30s and late 20s.
What are your favorite things to do?
Now, I still like to hunt artifacts, and also I play golf, and favorite thing to do that's about it.
Through your life, you've liked to hunt and fish.
Yeah, I love to hunt and fish. I catch fish, and went fishing last week, caught just 5 pretty nice fish, and catch them, release them. Just, you can buy fish cheaper than you can clean them.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
That it?
Yeah, that's it.